Shalom and good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcasting to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories. Less than a day after a U.S. decision to designate Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization has officially taken effect, the Iranian Parliament approved a countermeasure to the American move by adopting a bill that labels the United States military in the Middle East as a terrorist entity. The U.S. Embassy in Beirut announced that the United States provided military equipment to the Lebanese Armed Forces valued at $14.3 million. The Egyptian Parliament in Cairo approved changes to the country's constitution that will grant President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi the legal backing to remain in power until 2030. Less than a day after a U.S. decision to designate Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization has officially taken effect, the Iranian Parliament approved a countermeasure to the American move by adopting a bill that labels the United States military in the Middle East as a terrorist entity. The Iranian bill, which was introduced by Iranian Defense Minister Amir Khatami, was voted on by 207 out of the 290-seat chamber. 204 Iranian lawmakers voted in favor of the bill, while 2 voted against and 1 abstained. An Iranian political analyst told TV7 that contrary to previous reports, Tehran's parliament, called the Majlis in Farsi, designated on its terror list only part of the U.S. military, specifically SATCOM, which is the U.S. Central Command tasked with American military operations across the Middle East and Southwest Asia, excluding Israel and India. According to the contents of the bill, the Iranian government was granted the necessary legal authorization to act firmly in response to what it termed as terrorist actions by U.S. forces in the region. Furthermore, the bill instructs the government to actively pursue legal, political, and diplomatic measures to neutralize the American measures vis-à-vis the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, yet stopped short from elaborating on any specific courses of action. That said, Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif embarked on a vigorous campaign against the U.S. decision to designate the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, commonly known by its acronym IRGC, as a terrorist entity. While the top Iranian diplomat consistently avoided the IRGC's actions that have led to Washington's decision, Zarif stressed during a visit to the Syrian capital Damascus yesterday that Washington's policies are clearly based on serving the interests of the State of Israel. During his visit to Israel's northern neighbor, the Iranian foreign minister met with his Syrian counterpart Walid al-Muallim and President Bashar al-Assad, after which he declared that the two countries will continue to cooperate to bolster their bilateral relations and implement additional measures in order to improve the economic situation in both Syria and Iran. According to a Syrian political analyst, Damascus and Tehran will work together to strengthen cooperation on the ground that will aim to mitigate what he termed as the negative impact of the U.S. decision on Iran.
يعني بالتأكيد سوريا ستدين هذا الموضوع. دمشق تربط علاقات وثيقة مع طهران، تربط علاقات على المستوى الاستراتيجي. الحرس الثوري بالنسبة لدمشق يعتبر إحدى مؤسسات الدولة الإيرانية، فبالتالي لن تأخذ موقف منه بالتأكيد، وبالعكس هي ستقوم بإدانة مثل هذا الموضوع، وربما التعاون مع باقي دول المنطقة، دول المنطقة والمنظمات التي تتعامل مع إيران أو حلفاء إيران على وجه التحديد لمحاولة الحد من التأثيرات السلبية لهذا الموضوع.
While Iranian officials are making extensive efforts to mitigate the impact of the U.S. decision, those efforts clearly signal the mounting pressure on the Islamic Revolutionary regime. The Islamic Republic Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei pointed to the IRGC as a prominent pillar in the regime's operations on all levels, yet stressed that the American measure will achieve nothing.
The guards are a very prominent structure in our country. If it's to confront an enemy from a political standpoint, the guards are leading it. If it's to confront an enemy in the field and theater of military operations, the guards are leading it. If the enemy is already inside the country and on our streets, the guards are confronting it. That is why you see the Americans resort to such tactics, which of course will achieve nothing.
With all of the Iranian efforts to counter the U.S. decision, Washington does not appear overly troubled. Instead, during a question-and-answer session of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo at the Texas A&M University, the American top diplomat warned of vigorous consequences to any international dealings with the IRGC.
Mr. Secretary, with the new designation of Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a foreign terrorist organization, I was wondering how heavily the United States would be pursuing sanctions against companies with alleged dealings with this organization.
Vigorously. So the second piece of this is to convince Iran it's not in their best interest to continue to foment terror and engage in malign activity all throughout the Middle East. So the next step down from that is how do you do it? One of the pieces of that is our sanctions effort. We have lots of efforts apart from that. With respect to the designation, which actually came into effect just this week, some 20% of the Iraqi economy is controlled by the IRGC. So my wisdom for those of you who are connected to companies that might be doing business with them, or if you're the general counsel for a European bank that's doing business with a company that might have a 20% shareholder to the IRGC, is you should check your work.
It is important to know that Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is comprised of an estimated 125,000-strong military with army, navy, and air units. It also commands the so-called Basij, which is a religious volunteer paramilitary force, and maintains control over Iran's missile programs. The IRGC also controls a foreign branch, which is called the Quds Force, that oversees Iran's proxy wars in the region, that also includes the country's efforts to entrench military along Israel's northern frontier. Now, with regard to Israel's northern neighbor Lebanon, the U.S. Embassy in Beirut announced that the United States provided military equipment to the Lebanese Armed Forces, valued at $14.3 million. In a statement published on the embassy's Twitter account, it was revealed that the delivery included night vision devices, radios, and other equipment, which is part of the U.S. ongoing support to the Lebanese military. While Israel complained in the past about the growing influence by the Iranian proxy Hezbollah over the Lebanese armed forces, the Israeli Foreign Ministry in Jerusalem said it had no response to TV7's request for comment. Nevertheless, an Israeli security official who requested to remain anonymous told TV7 that concerns were voiced to relevant U.S. officials and that Jerusalem will continue to closely monitor the Lebanese arena, which continues to serve as a hub for Iranian-backed terror organizations, including Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Islamic Jihad. Now to Israel's western neighbor, where the Egyptian Parliament in Cairo approved changes to the country's constitution that will effectively grant President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi the legal backing to remain in power until 2030. In practical terms, the referred to amendments will extend President Sisi's current term to 6 years from 4, and then allow him to run again for a third presidential term, which would last 6 years as well. The amendments would also bolster the role of the military in political life and increase the president's power over the judiciary. Supporters of the amendments insist that the changes are necessary to give President Sisi more time to complete major development projects and economic reforms. His critics claim, however, that the changes concentrate more powers in the hands of the leader, accused by human rights groups and Islamist organizations of presiding over a relentless crackdown on freedoms. It is important to note, however, that even though Parliament had approved the amendments, a nationwide endorsement in a referendum is necessary to implement the changes. A date for the referendum has not yet been confirmed, but authorities have launched a wide-scale public campaign to encourage Egyptians to participate. Thank you for watching us. Praying for the peace of Israel and the peace of Jerusalem. I'm Jonathan Hassan. Have a Erev Tov, and we will see you again tomorrow at the same time.